The mountain town was small and quiet, surrounded by tall pine trees and the smell of wood smoke. The winters were long and cold, and the people there worked hard just to get through each season. Among them lived a woman named Elena, whose gentle smile hid a deep sadness that no one could see. She had once been a happy wife and mother, but fate had been cruel. Her husband, a kind man who worked at the local mill, had died in an accident when their little boy Noah was only 4 years old. After his death, Elena's life changed completely. She had no family close by, no savings, and no one to lean on. The people in town respected her, but they also whispered behind her back. Some said she was cursed that tragedy followed her. Others said she should have left town and started over somewhere new. But she stayed because this was where her husband was buried, and she couldn't leave the place that still held his memory. Elena worked 2 jobs just to survive. In the mornings, she cleaned classrooms at the small school. She'd wake up before sunrise, tie her hair in a scarf, and walk through the fog with her old broom in hand. After finishing her shift, she would hurry home to make lunch for Noah, help him with his schoolwork, and then head to her second job at the diner. By nightfall, she would come home exhausted, her hands rough from cleaning and her eyes heavy from lack of sleep. But when Noah ran to her with open arms and called her Mom, all her tiredness melted away. Despite her struggles, Elena never complained. She smiled when she spoke, thanked people even when they ignored her, and always helped others when she could. But deep inside, she felt invisible. People pitied her, but no one really saw her. They looked at her as a widow, a mother, a woman left behind. Meanwhile, far from town at the edge of the forest lived a man named Liam. He was a lumberjack, strong and tall with hands hardened by years of cutting wood. He lived alone in a small wooden cabin that smelled of pine and smoke. Every morning before dawn, he would sharpen his axe, pack his lunch, and head deep into the forest. The work was hard, dangerous, and lonely, but Liam didn't mind. He liked the silence of the woods. The wind in the trees, the sound of falling logs, and the distant call of birds were the only company he needed. Liam was not the kind of man who spoke much. People in town thought he was strange because he rarely joined their gatherings or talked about his life. But those who knew him said he had a good heart. Sometimes he fixed fences for free or helped carry heavy loads for the elderly. He didn't do it for thanks. He just did it because it was right. One rainy afternoon, the paths of Elena and Liam crossed. Elena was walking home from the school with Noah, trying to shield him from the rain with an old umbrella that had a broken rib. The wind was strong, and every few steps the umbrella flipped inside out. Noah was shivering and Elena's thin coat was soaked through. Liam was driving back from work in his old pickup truck when he saw them struggling on the side of the muddy road. He slowed down and rolled down the window. "You'll catch a cold walking out here," he said gently. "Can I give you a ride?" Elena hesitated. She didn't know him well, though she had seen him in town before. But Noah looked up at her with his big brown eyes and smiled at the man in the truck. Something about Liam's quiet face made her feel safe. She nodded, and they climbed in. The ride was short, but something in that moment stayed with both of them. Liam noticed how carefully Elena wrapped her scarf around her son, even when she was freezing herself. He noticed her soft voice and how she thanked him 3 times before leaving. He didn't know why, but as she disappeared into the mist, he wished he could see her again. A few days later, Liam found himself walking into the small diner in town where Elena worked. It wasn't a place he usually went, but he told himself he needed coffee after a long day. Elena looked surprised to see him. Her hair was tied up and her cheeks were flushed from the heat of the kitchen. She smiled politely and asked, "Coffee?" "Yes," he said, and after a pause added, "And maybe a slice of that pie too." From then on, Liam came by often. Sometimes it was just for a coffee, sometimes for a meal, but mostly it was for a few quiet minutes of watching Elena laugh with the customers or wipe flour from her hands. He didn't talk much, but every time he left a small tip. Sometimes a coin, sometimes a wooden carving he had made during the night. At first, Elena thought it was just kindness. But then she noticed the way Liam always smiled when Noah came by to pick her up. He'd give the boy a little carved toy, a bird, a bear, a small boat, and tell him, "You have to name it before it will fly." Noah adored him instantly. Days turned into weeks, and something gentle began to grow between them. They didn't talk about love or promises. It was in small things, the way Liam waited outside the diner when the snow fell too heavily, or how Elena packed an extra sandwich in case he came by after work. Still, the town talked. People whispered when they saw them together. "She's desperate," some said. "He's just lonely," said others. But neither of them cared much. They were too busy finding small moments of peace in each other's presence. One cold evening after closing the diner, Elena stepped outside to find Liam waiting with a small wooden box. He looked nervous, rubbing the back of his neck. "I made something," he said, handing it to her. Inside were two tiny wooden figures, a woman and a child holding hands. The carving was rough but beautiful. "They looked lonely," Liam said softly. Elena's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever noticed her loneliness before. She wanted to say something, but her voice trembled too much. She only whispered, "Thank you." That night, she placed the figures on her windowsill beside her husband's old photograph. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was betraying the past by thinking about the future. As winter deepened, Liam began stopping by her house with chopped firewood or small gifts for Noah. Sometimes he stayed for tea, sitting quietly at the kitchen table while Elena told stories about her childhood. He listened more than he spoke, but when he smiled, his whole face softened. One day, as they sat together, Noah climbed into Liam's lap and said, "Are you going to be my new dad?" Elena froze, but Liam didn't flinch. He looked at Noah and said, "If your mom says yes." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, this simple man with rough hands and kind eyes, and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. A week later, Liam came to her small house again, holding his old hat in his hands. "I don't have much," he said. "No big house or fine clothes. But I can promise you this. No one in my home will ever feel alone again." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She nodded before she could even speak. The wedding was small. Just a few neighbors, the pastor, and little Noah standing proudly beside them. Liam wore a clean shirt for the first time in years, and Elena wore a simple white dress borrowed from a friend. When they said their vows, the wind blew softly through the trees outside, as if the forest itself was blessing them. That night, as they returned to Liam's cabin, Elena stood by the doorway holding Noah's hand. The cabin was small but warm, lit by a flickering fire. She looked at Liam and smiled. "It feels like home," she said. Liam nodded, his voice quiet. "That's all I ever wanted." But neither of them knew that life still had one more test waiting, something that would show how strong love could be when built not from wealth or beauty, but from two lonely hearts that finally found each other. The days after the wedding were quiet but full of small joys. Elena woke up each morning to the sound of birds outside the cabin instead of city noise. The forest air was clean, the mornings cool, and the smell of pine drifted through the windows. She would cook breakfast while Noah helped feed the chickens outside. Liam would already be gone by sunrise, walking to the logging site with his axe over his shoulder, the mist curling around his boots. For the first time in years, Elena felt peace. There was no rush, no city noise, no judging eyes. When she finished her morning chores, she sat by the window, sewing clothes or preparing dinner for when Liam returned. At night, they would all sit near the fire. Noah would talk about school, sometimes showing his drawings, and Liam would listen with patience that surprised her. He never interrupted, never raised his voice. He simply smiled, nodding at the boys' stories. Slowly, the cabin turned into a home. Liam built a small swing outside from an old tree branch so Noah could play. He even started carving small toys again, but this time he gave them away, a sign that his heart had finally opened. Elena often watched him from the doorway, the golden evening light touching his face, and thought that she had never seen a man so quiet yet so full of warmth. But life, even in peace, is never without its trials. Winter that year came early, harsher than usual. Snow began falling thick and fast, and the logging company cut down its work hours. That meant less income, and Liam started worrying silently. He didn't tell Elena, but she noticed the way he looked at the empty shelves in the pantry and the fewer coins in his pocket. One evening, she found him sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "Liam," she said softly, "what's wrong?" He sighed, rubbing his hands together. "Work's been slow. The roads are frozen, and they can't move the logs down the mountain. Might be a few weeks before I get paid again." Elena smiled gently and said, "Then we'll make do." We always have. She wasn't afraid of hard times. She had faced worse. That night, She made soup with what they had left and shared it with a smile as if it were a feast. Liam looked at her across the table, realizing again how strong she was. She never complained. Even when things got difficult, she found a way to make life feel beautiful. But soon a bigger test arrived. One afternoon, while Liam was working deep in the forest, a heavy branch fell and struck his leg. His co-workers carried him back to the cabin, his face pale with pain. The local doctor came and said the leg was broken. It would take months to heal and Liam wouldn't be able to work during that time. Elena didn't cry. She thanked the doctor, helped Liam lie down, and stayed by his side for days, tending to him like he was the most important person in the world. She made him tea, kept the fire burning, and told him stories so he wouldn't feel trapped in silence. Noah sat beside him, showing his drawings and saying, "You'll be strong again, just like the trees." Liam hated feeling useless. He had always been the one who worked, who provided, who protected. But now he couldn't even chop wood. One night, when he thought Elena was asleep, he whispered, "You deserve better than a broken man." Elena, half awake, turned toward him and said softly, "I didn't marry you for what you can do. I married you for who you are." That simple truth made his eyes fill with tears. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. From that night on, he promised himself that when he healed, he would never let her feel alone again. Days turned into weeks. Snow piled high outside, and sometimes they were cut off from town for days. Food grew short, and the firewood ran low, but they faced it together. Elena walked through the snow every morning to fetch supplies from a neighbor 2 miles away, while Noah helped tend the animals. At night they sang softly together, their laughter echoing through the cabin. Even in hardship, their love made the small home glow with warmth. By spring, Liam's leg had healed enough for him to return to work. But something inside him had changed. He no longer worked only to earn money. He worked with a deeper purpose, to build a life worthy of Elena's strength and kindness. He started planting trees around the cabin, saying, "If we take from the forest, we should give something back." Elena helped him plant small saplings, and Noah named each one. Soon their home was surrounded by a ring of young green life, a sign of hope. As the seasons changed, people in town began to see Liam and Elena differently. The same neighbors who once whispered now spoke kindly about them. Some came to Liam for help fixing fences or chopping wood, and he always said yes. Elena started baking bread and selling it at the market, earning a little extra to help their home. Together, they became a symbol of quiet strength, the woman who never gave up and the man who chose love over loneliness. But one summer day brought another test, the hardest yet. A wildfire started miles away in the forest. At first it seemed far, but the wind changed and carried the smoke toward the town. By nightfall, the orange glow could be seen from their window. The air smelled of burning wood and ashes began to fall like snow. Liam's first thought was to protect his family. He packed their few things and told Elena to take Noah down the road to the safety center in town. But when he looked at the trees around their cabin, the ones they had planted together, his heart ached. "I can't just let the fire take everything," he said. Elena grabbed his hand. "Liam, it's not worth your life." He looked into her eyes and said, "It's not about the cabin. It's about the life we built here." She saw that he meant it, and she knew she couldn't stop him. So while she took Noah to safety, Liam stayed behind to help the other men build fire breaks to slow the flames. He worked through the night, his face blackened with ash, his injured leg aching, but he didn't stop. By morning, rain began to fall. The fire finally started to die down. The forest was damaged, but the cabin still stood. When Elena and Noah returned, the air was thick with smoke, but the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. Liam was sitting on the porch, covered in soot, exhausted but alive. Elena ran to him and hugged him tightly. "You promised," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He smiled faintly. "And I kept it." After that day, life slowly returned to normal. The forest healed, the trees grew again, and the air once more filled with birdsong. Their love grew stronger too, built on hardship, patience, and the kind of trust that only true hearts understand. Years passed, and Noah grew tall, helping Liam with the logging work. People often told him, "You're lucky to have a father like him." And Noah would answer proudly, "He chose us when no one else did." Elena never forgot that first rainy afternoon when Liam stopped his truck. Sometimes, when she watched the sunset from their porch, she whispered to herself, "If kindness had a face, it would look like his." Their life was never rich with gold or fame, but it was full of peace. They laughed more than they cried, loved more than they feared, and proved that true happiness doesn't come from perfect beginnings. It comes from hearts that refuse to give up on each other. And so, in that small mountain town, people stopped calling Elena the widow or the poor woman. They called her the lumberjack's wife, and said that theirs was the kind of love, story that made even the hardest hearts believe in second chances.